Hello, welcome to Taskmaster Talks with Kevin Sullivan. I'm your host, JP John Paz. With me, of course, the star of the show, the former WCW and ECW World Tag Team Champion, one of the greatest minds and bookers ever in the history of the business, the Games Master, the Taskmaster, the Devil himself, Mr. Kevin Sullivan. Kevin, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, JP. How are you?
I am doing good. Can't complain. As far as what's going on in the landscape of the world, it's a little bit crazy out there. But as far as the wrestling world's concerned, and I hadn't asked you about this, I was just curious. What do you think about Bray Wyatt, and what do you think about him coming back to WWE, and what do you think about this character?
I like that he says who he is, don't you?
Yep.
But, the family, I mean, they got a great pedigree, you know what I mean? Blackjack, Barry, Kendall, Mike. Uh, I think it was the right thing to do. And I didn't like him wrestling in that mask. Once it was okay, but then with the lights, it made it very difficult.
I know a lot of the wrestlers too had complained that that character was kind of killing them. Like you said, the lights sucked. They weren't able to really have a good match with him. I know a lot, like even Seth Rollins. I remember he was complaining that it kind of killed him off because that character, the Fiend, was terrible.
Well, I think they were going for the shock value, and I think this is a thing we're seeing that since Hunter's taken over, he's gotten back more into wrestling.
Do you like the fact that he hasn't wrestled yet?
Uh, yeah, I think they're trying to sort this out, and they're taking their time.
Do you think he needs to be in the ring sooner or later, as far as because he's been back for weeks now, but he hasn't even sniffed really the ring.
I think that when they announce that he is going to wrestle, they'll draw a big number.
What would you do with him, like for this character? Like, would you primarily make him a quote unquote part time guy who doesn't wrestle as often, or like how would you handle him?
Well, I think you got to expose him right away after they decide when, and then you're going to have to smash him over because he was over when he was before he was a Fiend, he was over super. And again, I think they're just doing the right thing, sorting this out and step by step. And I'm sure they got a plan. And I think he needs to be exposed wrestling again with this new character.
To me, it's interesting though that they haven't had him wrestle yet. Is that saying something, or is this just a big buildup? You think?
I think it's a big buildup, but I think this goes to show you they're not in any panic mode. They're not just throwing him out there. They want to build. And when he comes back, I think they'll have a huge number.
Would you have him in a big match against Roman Reigns down the line? Is that where you think maybe they might be building and leading towards?
Yeah, Roman's got to wrestle, somebody. And he's going to be fresh, new character. They'll get him over. And I think they'll draw a big pay per view. Don't you?
I think they would do pretty good because he is super popular. But they always say about Bray Wyatt, they say, that famous expression, and then the bell rings. That's been the only real knock on him. Like he's not that good of a worker. Have you noticed that, or do you agree with that at all?
I don't agree with it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I think he's very, very entertaining. And, I've said this 1,000 times. It's, to me, a good worker who puts asses in seats. And I don't think they would be paying him the money they were paying him if they didn't see something there. What is his merchandise sales through the roof at one point?
Yep.
That says something.
What was funny about that is usually when the guy gets fired or released, the merchandise goes 50% off. They try to get rid of it and it's not as popular. I remember they put his 50% off and it was selling so well. They took it off 50% off and they put him back on the regular price for the merch and it was still selling, even though he technically didn't work there. So people were loving his merch. And obviously, that tells to his popularity too.
Right. I mean, if you're selling merchandise when you're not there, that goes to show you how over he was. And was his pay per view numbers good?
it's hard to tell because of the PLE, the premium live event era. They don't
Yeah,
give you figures and numbers anymore. They just throw out there that, like, when he returned to Extreme Rules, it said it was the most watched Extreme Rules ever. So they don't give you an exact number, but they just tell you the importance. So he was definitely popular. People were interested in his return.
obviously it was the most watched ever, right?
Yep.
So I mean, I actually believe that maybe his, people knocking his work was that character saddled the Fiend character. Now, the chains are off him, to so to say, and I think we're going to see a very, very entertaining new character with him.
I hope so because I didn't particularly care for the Fiend that much. I didn't really care for. Remember, he was doing the workout thing with the little puppets, and they were working out. Like, I liked when he was doing the Waylon Mercy. Remember
Yeah,
Dan Spivey? I like that character was cool and different, and almost a little bit like you to a certain extent, where he was like a cult leader too.
yeah, I like that too when he had the group. I mean, that was very entertaining, and I don't think they can go back to that. That's why I say I really appreciate them taking their time with this, and they're going to make sure it's right.
To me, I feel like a lot of him, he obviously takes from different guys, but I feel like a little bit from you, a little bit from Spivey, right? Am I crazy? He feels very old school with a lot of the stuff that he kind of derives from.
Well, I think too, he's a third generation. He's been around the dressing room since he's been a kid. Uh, so I'm sure that he understands, and his work is different than today. And you're right, he's kind of old school. And that character was, if you tell me that his merchandise was selling when it wasn't there, it got to the people.
Yeah, he was definitely over. He almost feels like he might be like their version of the Undertaker again. He doesn't need the title. You know what I mean? He's more storyline driven. He just feels like that kind of character for them.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing about it. It's almost like a offshoot of the Undertaker.
Do you like the supernatural stuff, or do you think he should kind of stay away from that stuff?
Well, I think that was then, and this is now. And now I'm coming out about the family and stuff. I think they're going to drift away from that in some respects.
Did you happen to see that character Uncle Howdy? Did you happen to see that at all?
No, tell me about it.
So he's talking, right? And he's kind of cutting a babyface promo. And then on the monitor, quote unquote, Uncle Howdy comes and he tells him, shut up. You better start following me, listening to me. Basically, almost like contradicting what Bray was saying. So it's either him as a different character or it's somebody else, but they refer to him as Uncle Howdy. He almost looks like Barry Windham, like to look to him, but he also has his earring in, and the earring was his brother's earring. So it's a weird character, but it looks like an old version or a weird version of Barry Windham, who obviously is his uncle.
Right. And maybe they're playing that up. Sorry, I did see that one thing now that you mentioned it when he was contradicting, but maybe he'll be two characters like the great Muta and Muta.
Yeah, or Foley doing the three. It could be
Yeah.
three characters, something like that. I know he keeps saying Wyndham six, like that. So they're like, oh, could he be six different characters? So I don't. I mean, that would be too much. But I mean, I don't know where he's headed with this. But obviously, Uncle Howdy is interesting. Just I don't know, just the look of it, how it looks like Barry Windham. I just think interesting. I don't think it's going to be Barry, but I think maybe a little homage to him.
Yeah, I think so too, and rightfully so. I said Barry was one of the greatest baby faces of all times.
So what they're doing with him is intriguing because people are definitely interested. If you look at the ratings, he'll be on, and like that, quarter hour rating goes up and stuff. So people are definitely interested in what he does. I guess we'll see what he does next. But they hired this guy Rob Fee. He's from Marvel, and he's been writing a lot of the storyline with Bray. So I guess that's his buddy. And they're almost going a little bit of from the comic book world, bringing that to wrestling.
Don't you think that we've always followed comic books?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when I was a kid, there was a cover of a Superman comic book where Argentina Rocca was throwing Superman out of the ring.
Yes.
So, you know, and then at one time, if you ever watched that movie about not Steve Reeves, George Reeves, the guy that played Superman,
Yep.
they wanted him to wrestle. So, and then going back in when Pittsburgh was a territory, Tony Marino was the Batman. So we've always had, and don't you think that some of the wrestlers that wore paint looked like the Joker? Well, Sting, the Crow. So we've
Yeah.
always kind of followed comic books.
Yeah. And The Crow is a movie and a comic book too.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
yeah, definitely. So they got this guy Rob from that world, very good writer from Marvel and stuff, but he was also putting QR codes out there and Easter eggs and teasers. So fans that were really paying attention, I noticed online, like they're like, "Oh, look, this is where this Easter egg goes," and it's almost sending you on a little bit of a wild goose chase. But I just thought, like, wow, we haven't seen that in wrestling before. That's interesting. They're really trying to be more interactive and really get people like thinking and buzzing and wondering what's going to happen next.
yeah. And I think that's the entertainment factor of wrestling, where you're not sure where it's going. You
Especially
know?
with Bray, because he's even when he's speaking, you don't know where he's going. He's kind of all over the place in a good way, though.
Yeah,
They always said, like when he would do his promos and everything else, that everybody would be very interested because he's not one of the scripted guys. Like you can't script him. Does his own promos, so that kind of makes him more appealing to me anyway. That he's not going to be basically a writer is going to be writing his material for him
don't you think they've cut back on that too?
with
Or,
Triple H. Yes.
yeah. So I mean, I think I got to give a lot of credit to Triple H. That was a big shoe to fill when Vince left. And rather than following Vince's pattern, he's developing his own. And he's bringing fans back that haven't watched the product for a while. And they're being very successful, right?
Yeah, the stock is way up.
Yeah.
The funny thing about the stock being up is Vince is technically still the owner, so he's sitting at home doing nothing, collecting even more money, because his son-in-law is doing a good job.
Yeah, that's great. Huh?
Isn't that the dream? Isn't that, hey, I'm going to put somebody else to work, and hey, if they're going to, do a great job, I'm going to sit back and collect all this money.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it was when he left. I think the stock was at $66 or 65, and then it went up to like 78. So I mean, obviously, he's doing a pretty good job. The ratings have been pretty good. It's hard to say with Raw because Monday Night Football and that's always dominant, but he's been doing pretty good as far as Triple H. Even the storylines are better, the shows are better, so he's headed in a good direction.
Yes, he is. My hat's off to him. And I mean, the people that turned away from WWE are turning back in, so that's a good sign. And he's only been there how many months? 5?
Yeah, about 4 or 5. Yep.
Yeah. So let's give him a year, and I'm sure the rating is going to go back up.
And usually the premium live events, the quote unquote pay-per-views, they've usually been pretty good. And he usually gives the matches some pretty good time. And so that's one thing I noticed, that the shows seem to be better too, like just in a more positive direction all the way around. Even for the hardcore fans, they'll even like the shows.
Yeah, and I think, that he understands that people are paying extra money, so he's giving finishes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
E- Even when he's bringing in Logan Paul and the celebrities, they've been doing a pretty good job. So, kudos or hats off to Triple H so far. So far, so good.
Yes. I mean, I don't think anybody could have done a better job.
He's been preparing for this role for a long time. That's according to a lot of the guys. Yeah.
Yes, and he's a student of the game. He has a great background. Learned from Kowalski.
Yep.
He respects the history of pro wrestling, yet he's not stuck in the past. And he sees a bright future, and they're doing exceptionally well, I think. And once they go get something hot, a big package again, they'll go on tour everywhere and draw big money, especially in Europe, right? Which is very hot right now for pro wrestling.
Yep. Even the Clash at the Castle a few months ago when they did that, man, that killed. I think it was 65,000 people were there. So I mean, they killed it over there.
Yeah, and even the independents over there. I was just talking to Gangrel, and he was in Ireland, and they had three houses. One was 8,000 people, the other one was five, and I don't know what the other one was. But
Wow.
yeah,
Damn. So they're doing pretty good again over there. It's good.
yeah,
Good
yeah,
sign.
yeah.
So going from one thing that was doing pretty good to maybe one thing that's not doing pretty good, and that's WCW Mayhem 1999. It was held on November 21st in 99 in Toronto, Ontario, Canada at the Air Canada Centre. About 13,839 in attendance, so good attendance. The pay-per-view buys 200,000, so not bad. It was called the Tournament of Champions or the Night of Champions. Obviously, you're not here. This is the Russo era. Where are you in November of 99?
And the Keys. Yeah,
Fishing?
yeah,
Own or no, you didn't own a gym yet, so you're just
no,
hanging out.
yeah.
So here, after we've talked about Halloween Havoc 99, now we're talking about Mayhem 99. This is the second pay-per-view of the Russo era. Obviously, Bischoff is gone in September, so Russo is now fully taken over here. Just a weird part, though, leading into the show. So this is the 32-man tournament that we briefly touched upon before. So now the final four are at this pay-per-view. So it's Benoit and Jarrett, Bret Hart and Sting. So not a bad final four, but how we got there is just the one weird part that I didn't particularly think made a lot of sense. So Sting was the champ because remember I was telling you Hogan laid down
Right.
and Sting just pinned him. Hogan's gone, so it's like okay, that's weird. Then later on in the night, Goldberg beat Sting in a short match, technically speaking for the title, but they kind of mention it's not really for the title, and Sting's not the champion because he beat up the ref and we stripped him of the title. So leading into the tournament, confusion for me. That just I don't know. To me, that didn't make a lot of sense because if you look at it, remember Hogan? Okay, he's champion. You got the Hebner brothers. They do the switcheroo with the ref. Okay, that makes sense that you have to hold up the title because Andre's not really champion. He gives the title to DiBiase. You can't do that. Hogan got screwed. Okay, you have to put the title up in a tournament. This though, this doesn't make sense. It's like Sting standing on somebody, then Goldberg beats Sting, and then Sting beats up the ref. Like this is, I don't know. It's a weird way to create a tournament to me.
I have to agree with you.
So, and 32 man is weird too. It's an odd number. Like 16 man, 8 man, 32. All right. That's to me, it's weird.
Let's go back to our cousin boxing.
Mhm.
When Ali was stripped of the title, they had a tournament. 8 guys in the tournament. Jimmy Ellis won the tournament. And then the only 2 states that didn't recognize that title was the New York Athletic Commission and the Massachusetts Athletic Commission. And they had Douglas against Frazier. And that's when we had the 2 champions.
So here in this tournament, it's just confusing the way, and they'll have the video package to start off the show, but it's just confusing the way we got there. It's just, I don't know. It's one of the things where I know, I guess they just wanted a new champion. The way they went about it was weird. But like I said, the final four, Sting, Jarrett, Benoit, and Bret Hart, pretty good final four, actually. When you actually break down all the nonsense, those are 4 pretty good guys.
Very solid. Very solid.
So the first match of the night is actually really good. It's the first of the 2 title matches, which will lead to the main event of the final 4 here. Chris Benoit defeats Jeff Jarrett in the tournament semifinal. The match goes about 9 minutes and 30 seconds here. Pretty, I mean, you almost can't go wrong with Jarrett and Benoit. Jarrett's good, and obviously Benoit is one of the best.
Yeah, and I've become a big Jeff Jarrett fan over the last few years. His body of work stands up to just about anybody. And that match he had with Flair, I think he saved that match.
Definitely. What do you
Yeah,
think about him signing with AEW now?
I think that's great. I think he'll do a good job. I mean, his father was one of the most successful promoters of all times. Great guy. Uh, I just saw him at the Cauliflower Alley Club. Uh, they were the last territory to hold out. In fact, Vince went down to Memphis and created the Mr. McMahon character there.
Yeah. Yep. Pretty amazing. Mick Memphis, they called it. Yeah, he was the big heel down there, and it's funny to see because on TV and at that time in the early '90s, I mean, he's like a goofball. Hey, great maneuver, pal, and all that like happy-go-lucky stuff. And then all of a sudden, he's in Memphis. You're like, wow, this is a completely different guy. Who is this guy? This is a great character.
Right. And at that time, he was the best heel in the business.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
So for this match, the powers that be, which is Russo behind the camera, and obviously Oklahoma, Ed Ferrara, we talked about that before. They're the powers that be, and they have Gerald and Pat, which is really the Harris brothers pretending to be, I guess, so to speak, making fun of Gerald Briscoe and Pat Patterson. They're called Creative Control. They come down and they're trying to help Jeff Jarrett, who's behind, or he's with the powers that be. So Dustin Rhodes comes down and he helps Benoit make it a fair fight. Benoit nails Jarrett with a guitar, and that helps Benoit win. So it's a good match, but there's a little bit of chicanery involved with them trying to cheat for Jeff Jarrett to win, to no avail, though. I guess you could say a little bit overbooked, considering you have Benoit and Jarrett. You kind of don't need to do, you know what I mean? You don't need all that Gaga stuff, but it worked to a certain extent.
You know what I don't like about that finish? Jarrett gets hit with his own gimmick.
Oh, you don't like that? Okay.
No. Did the Sheik ever get the pencil taken away from him and him lose?
I don't think so.
No, didn't happen. When Hogan gave you the big leg, which was a gimmick move, right? Did anybody kick out?
Not usually.
No. I think maybe the Ultimate Warrior did, but other than that, I can't remember. I mean, think of Abdullah. Think about guys that use gimmicks. I don't like that they took the gimmick away from Jeff. They didn't need that with those two guys who were magnificent workers. But that's here nor there. They had their idea and the creative control. Maybe they wanted to expose that maybe they weren't as strong as I don't know. I don't know what they were doing.
It's just yeah, to me, it's just a little overbooked because you have Benoit and Jarrett. It's like, okay, these guys, awesome match, and they're going to knock it out of the park. And then at the end, it's like this guy cheats, and Dustin comes down to kind of prevent him from cheating. Just not necessary to me.
No.
And here they have Jarrett and Creative Control then beat up Benoit, after the match, which is like, okay, Benoit's a match later on. They're kind of making him even weaker for later on. Then they go to the back, and Tenay is with Disco, and Disco says he's going to defend his cruiserweight title tonight. Then Creative Control and Jeff Jarrett then beat him up as they walk by. So for some reason, they're really trying to get Jarrett and Creative Control over, even though Benoit just basically beat them, in the segment before.
Would you call that 50-50 booking?
Yeah, I mean, maybe, or is they're trying to get them to have their heat back? I don't know.
Are they going to, is Creative Control going to wrestle and pay off the heat? No. Right?
Nope, not tonight. Nope.
So there got to be a reason to get all that heat, I would think.
So then the next match, we have Evan Courageous with Medusa defeating Disco Inferno with Tony Marinara to win the Cruiserweight Championship. The match goes 8 minutes and 30 seconds. I don't know, nothing too great here. Nothing really to write home about. Tony Marinara, who's Tony Mamaluke eventually. I mean, he kind of interferes. Medusa interferes in the match, but Evan Courageous ends up winning and being the new Cruiserweight champion. What do you think of the pairing of Evan Courageous and Medusa? Kind of, I don't know. I'm not seeing the parallels there. It's a weird pairing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why Medusa was a fabulous wrestler. I don't know. It was like you said, I don't understand why that was there. Maybe they had a long range plan for it, but I don't see it.
And then Medusa dressed very scantily clad, if you will. I mean, which is no problem, obviously, but they were trying to make her like more of a sex symbol, almost like this young guy is with this, pretty older woman. Like that was the vibe that they were kind of going there. I guess trying to make it like courageous as some sort of like player, I guess, so to speak.
Your guess is as good as mine on that one, I guess.
You'll love this though. So Disco Inferno is like putting money up, saying that he'll put up $25,000 if he loses. But the whole thing is that he's kind of owes money to Tony Marinara, who at one point his dad on the show was Chuck Zito, who is like this mafia guy. So they're teasing all this Mama Luke mafia stuff with Tony Marinara and Disco and Chuck Zito, and it's kind of like funny in a way, but in a way it's like where the hell are they going with this like weird storyline where Disco is like a patsy for the for the mafia almost.
You think you could get away with that today, Mama Luke and Marinara?
Probably not. No.
You ever hear of the Italian Defamation League?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
I know that they were not against, or they were against the movie The Godfather for a little bit. I know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the Russo is heard, not shown, heard backstage because the powers that be, what they would do is the camera would almost be
Yeah.
set up here, facing out, so he'd be behind the camera, and he's yelling that Jarrett blew his chance, and that he was saying that did Jarrett really have what his take? He was trying to help Jarrett win the title, and Jarrett blew it. So that was kind of that segment. So, but you just hear Russo saying it and seeing Jarrett's reaction as he was pissed off.
A lot of TV time for something that ain't going to pay off.
Yes. Very interesting, yes, because it was almost trying to be like he was Vince McMahon behind the camera, but I don't know, it didn't really go anywhere. But like you said, there's no payoff to it.
Yeah.
So then Mean Gene is in the back with Norman Smiley, and he's doing the whole hardcore gimmick. He's very scared. He has to wrestle Brian Knobbs, so he's very nervous about it.
I thought Norman was one of the most entertaining characters I ever saw. And he could wrestle, he could do anything. He was a huge star in Mexico. Are you aware of that?
Yes. Yep.
I mean, we all kind of blew the boat on Norman, I believe.
And even in Japan, some of that stuff's like, wow, this guy's like a legit shooter. Like, my God, he could do some stuff here.
Yes, he was. I mean, he was big everywhere he went.
The Big Wiggle. Remember the Big Wiggle when he would do
Yeah,
that dance?
yeah. Spank him on the ass, yeah.
He's still with WWE today. He's down at NXT, one of the head trainers down there.
And he should be. He's a great guy.
So he comes out, and they're in Toronto. So he's wearing the Toronto Maple Leafs hockey jersey. Gets a huge pop from the hometown crowd. So he's over like Rover with this crowd. And Norman Smiley ends up defeating Brian Knobbs with Jimmy Hart in a hardcore match for the inaugural WCW Hardcore Championship. Match is actually, it's not that bad. It's not great either. I mean, there's a lot of weapons and silliness, but it's pretty entertaining for the most part. It goes about 7 minutes, 30 seconds. Norman, the new WCW Hardcore Champion. You like that?
I do like that. He deserved it. Worked hard, never missed the show. Great, great employee.
Do you think that they needed a hardcore title? Because this was obviously to counteract the fact that WWF had a hardcore championship.
I think at this time that hardcore had run its course. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
I know you're trying to give them something different. And that's really, you're trying to placate and grab ECW fans, but you can't have a hardcore match that match anything that ECW did.
It seems like to me, it's like, okay, did you really need the hardcore title? And they almost made it not very ECW like. They almost made it more jokey. The Norman Smiley stuff.
Right.
There's complete chaos. It wasn't traditional hardcore, so to speak. It was almost a little bit of comedy mixed in as well.
I think it was more than a little comedy, when he had the football helmet, came out with
Yep.
football. I mean, just Norman didn't need to be saddled with all those gimmicks, I don't think.
So they go to the back. There's the video package for the Filthy Animals and the Revolution. We hear from Shane Douglas. We hear from Conan, the Filthy Animals. Then we go to Disco Inferno, who's backstage again with Tony Marinara, and he's pleading with him. And Marinara says he will be at Nitro, and he's bringing everyone else with him. So that's the tease for the Mafia stuff. And like, something's going to happen at Disco. He blew it. He's going to, he owes the money. So they're kind of furthering this little Mafia lackey thing with Disco.
And I see what they're trying to do there, get people to tune in the next night.
Yep.
I don't think it would happen today, again, about cancel culture. But there was a different time and a different era, and I don't fault them for saying this is going to be tomorrow night. You're trying to serve two masters there. Pay per view and the plug in
Yep.
Nitro.
So the next match is a 6-person elimination tag match, the Filthy Animals and the Revolution. So the Revolution of Perry Saturn, Dean Malenko, and Asia, with Shane Douglas, who was injured, defeats the Filthy Animals, Eddie Guerrero, Billy Kidman, and Tori Wilson, with Conan, who's on the outside, also not wrestling. So it's an intergender elimination tag match. Match goes about 11 minutes and 15 seconds, with the Revolution going over. Nothing great here, but Saturn ends up getting the win, and he actually ends up pinning Tori Wilson to get the win. But nothing bad here, but nothing good either. Do you like intergender? I mean, it's an elimination match, but Asia's involved, Tori Wilson. Do you like the intergender stuff?
No, no.
Obviously, Asia and Tori Wilson aren't really good wrestlers either at that time. They're not even technically really trained wrestlers either.
Right, right. And I knew Asia way before she was in the business. Very nice person, you know. But she wasn't trained, and I don't think Tori was she?
No, I don't believe so. More of just from the modeling, side of thing and
Right.
the fitness world, but I don't think she was ever really trained to wrestle ever.
Yeah,
Even in her WWF days after this, I don't remember her really. I mean, she knew a little bit, but didn't really seem like she was fully trained.
exactly.
Looked great though. There's no doubt about that. Looks great.
Absolutely.
A little bit of man on female violence here. I mean, some people like intergender stuff. I'm not really a big fan of it, especially here in '99. It just definitely wasn't really something we were used to seeing, as far as like men and women being in the same match together.
Yeah. The first one I ever saw was Mrs. Saito versus Joyce Grables in the Omni. It went 4 seconds.
As it probably would realistically.
Yeah, against Saito, yeah.
So again, Jeff Jarrett and Creative Control beat up Buff Bagwell backstage. So if you're counting, they beat up Benoit, they beat up Disco, they beat up Buff. I mean, they're beating up everybody up behind the stage, and that's 3 or 4 times that Jarrett and Creative Control have been on the show. Is that a bit much? A bit overkill?
Again, I'm going to ask the question: where's the payoff for these guys getting all this heat? I'd rather
I
Jeff have done it by himself.
It's weird because they're in from what I'm remembering, and we'll get to it, but it doesn't really seem like even down the line that there's like this big payoff. Just seems like they're just trying to, I
Get
don't know,
over.
have Jarrett to beat everybody up with Creative Control.
Yeah. If Jeff had done it by himself to get his heat back, I got no problem with that. Jeff deserved to get his heat back, but he's sharing it with two other guys, right?
Yep. So again, here we go. We have Buff Bagwell versus Kurt Hennig in a retirement match. Jarrett and Creative Control then beat up Hennig. So now there's another guy that they beat up. There's the 4th or 5th guy that they beat up. And then Buff comes and beats them up and kind of scares them off so he can have his match with Hennig. But what happens is Buff ends up beating Hennig in about 8 minutes and wins the match and technically ends Kurt Hennig's career here. What do you think here? Just a really no build up, not a lot of big push here, but Buff Bagwell ends up ending Kurt Hennig's career.
Did they ever touch before this night?
Not really that I can remember. And it was a weird build up too. Like, why would these two guys have a retirement match?
Right, right.
It was
You know,
almost more predicated on Russo or the quote unquote powers that be trying to assert, like, oh, we can make anybody retire. We're going to put you guys in matches that you don't want to be in.
I mean, you got me.
So we're going to find out, not at this show, but if down the road, that Hennig agrees to work with the powers that be so he doesn't have to retire. So technically, the stipulation of this match doesn't hold weight for very, very long either.
Is that what you call false advertising?
A little bit.
Yeah,
A little bit of bait and switch there.
yeah.
So, I mean, we're in Canada, so obviously Bret Hart is going to be super duper over. He's going to be very popular. The fans are firmly behind him, and he's up in the next match as Bret Hart defeats Sting by submission in the other semifinal tournament match. Match goes again 9 minutes and 30 seconds. Pretty good here. Not great because I feel like they kind of maybe could have used some more time, but pretty damn good match for the most part here as Bret gets the win and Sting taps out to the sharpshooter. I mean, can't really say much here as far as negative. It's just a good match to kind of further the tournament.
I think it was a very good match, and you given Brett was a huge baby face, as you know, in Canada. And if Singh was going to do a job, it was right to do it to the sharpshooter.
And the finals, if you will, which would be the main event for later, is going to be two Canadians, Bret Hart versus Benoit. So you like that, having the two Canadians in the final against each other?
Yes, because they're going to have the match of the year.
So if you really look at it and kind of examine it, it seems like Bret and his poor booking, or maybe him not getting the push when Hogan was around, like, seems like that's kind of washing away as he's getting a main event push here. Do you like that though? I mean, you like Bret kind of finally being able to be the top dog in WCW?
He should have been pushed as soon as he came in. But yeah, I like that he's getting the push. He's Bret Hart in Canada. Can't lose.
Do you think that Hogan not around is a good thing for Bret? Like, Bret always said he thinks Hogan was responsible for holding him down in WCW.
Well, if that's what he thought, his perception is his reality. So for him, he might have felt more comfortable with Hogan not being around.
Do you think that Hogan was holding him back politically?
They paid Bret a lot of money. I I don't see, and that Bret and Hogan would have drawn a lot of money. I don't see that Hogan did hold him down. I think it was just at the time there were so many people stirring the pot that Bret got left out of the mix.
It's funny because, like, he comes into WCW, you have Hogan, Flair, Sting, Luger, Hall, Nash. Like, the Giants still kind of roaming around, DDP, Goldberg. I mean, I just named 9 or 10 guys just like that are main event top level guys. So it's not
Right.
like he came in, there was nobody else. I mean, there's a lot of guys you guys had that were main eventers at that point when he stepped in.
Yeah, Randy. I
Yes,
mean,
Savage. Yep.
uh, I just think somehow they dropped the ball, which, sometimes we all have these conspiracy theories and we perceive it that our own reality is what we think it is. So wouldn't Hogan and Bret drawn a lot of money? I think if it was handled right, they would have drawn a huge, huge amount of money.
Yep. I agree. There's huge money left on the table with those two.
Yeah.
So we go to the back, and Mike Tenay is with Lex Luger, and he's wearing a neck collar. And he said that he was injured. He doesn't know if he could wrestle. Obviously, playing it up, he's a heel. Doesn't know if he can compete. But a great line from him. He said that he doesn't want to let the fans down, and he will offer every fan in there a personal check because he can't wrestle. Great line by Lex. I mean, obviously being just a great heel, but I just thought that was so funny. It's like, he's full of shit. He's not. First of all, he's not injured. Second of all, he's not giving anybody a personal check.
Right, right. And Lex was very good at that, playing both sides. I thought that's where his best work was, when he was tag partners with Sting.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So then we have the dog collar match. Vampiro with Jerry Only of the Misfits defeating Berlin with the wall. He wins via submission in about 5 minutes in this dog collar match. I don't know. Something here just, and it wasn't that good of a match here. Just, I don't know. It just, nothing was working. And of course, Ed Ferrara, Oklahoma, comes out with Dr. Death Steve Williams. He gets involved. There's some chicanery and gaga stuff going on, but it just wasn't good. And there was too much going on. Thank God it was only 5 minutes because it was pretty short. But I feel like with Oklahoma, Jerry Only, Vampiro, The Wall, Berlin, just too much going on, and it just wasn't able to kind of get across whatever they want to get across. And after the match, Dr. Death gets in the ring and he wipes out Vampiro, he wipes out Jerry Only, and he wipes out Berlin as well.
Very difficult to follow.
I know you're not a big fan of the Oklahoma gimmick, and obviously it's him pretending to be JR, making fun of JR, with Dr. Death really being the guy, like his enforcer or whatever, his fixer, that he's basically bossing him around. Hey, beat up the wall, or hey, beat up Berlin, or destroy Vampiro. So that's kind of the gist of why Dr. Death is there. He's basically, it's JR, Dr. Death, but he's the heel, and he's telling his enforcer to go destroy these guys.
Yeah, and people knew that JR and Dr. Death were close.
Yep.
So we said it before, but we'll just glide over it. I wasn't a big fan of that Oklahoma gimmick.
So Dr. Death beats up, like I said, Vampiro and Jerry Only, and then we go to the back. Mike Tenay's with Scott Hall, who is both the United States champion and the television champion. He's saying if anybody wants to step up later, he will challenge anybody. If anybody wants to fight him for the WCW and TV title together. So they're really, giving Scott a pretty big push. He's a U.S. champion, he's a TV champion. He's getting a good amount of TV time. Not on this show, but eventually on Nitro, they do an angle where Nash and Hall are playing basketball in front of a garbage can, and Hall dumps the TV title in the garbage. What do you think about that?
I'm not a big fan of that.
It's funny. I asked Russo about it. I said, "What was the deal?" He didn't remember. Didn't know what was going on. He said he just wanted to get rid of the TV title. And I was thinking, it's like, is that the best way to do it? But WWE on TV, they just had Nikki Cross do that with the 24/7, almost the same exact thing. She walks by a garbage and she takes off the title and throws it in the garbage. So Russo did it, and Triple H did it too.
Well, the 24/7 I can see. I thought that was bullshit.
Horrible title, yeah. TV title obviously has a lot of lineage and legacy to it.
Huge lineage. Huge. At one time was the national TV title when there was territories.
Yeah, and Scotty Hall and Nash are joking around and throw it right in the garbage. They eventually do a storyline where Hacksaw Jim Duggan is the janitor. Remember, we talked about this before.
Yeah,
he finds a title. And then it's funny, Jimmy Hart booked Saturday night separately. He just like, okay, you'll be the TV champ on Saturday night. And that's kind of the way they booked it. And Duggan would be on that show, but they had him as a janitor, obviously not the greatest gimmick for legend like Duggan.
Right, right.
So then we have the next match, the total package Lex Luger with Elizabeth versus Ming. So he comes out with the phony neck break, says, he's really injured, blah, blah. But Ming doesn't care. He doesn't give two shits, as Ming just kind of just destroys him in about 5 minutes and gets the win. Nothing to write home here. Nothing, it's like a kind of like a blah match, if you will, because it was only 5 minutes and it was short. But basically trying to really build up Ming here. That was what I got out of it, as he beats Luger straight up with the tongue and death grip.
Obviously, they were trying to build him up if you beat Lex with the tongue and death grip.
Do you like that though? Like only a short match, Luger's
No, not
pretending an injury. You like the way they went about it?
not for those two guys. I like guys that gets times. You know what I mean? Especially those two. They could have told a great story.
And they were giving Ming at this point. Eventually, it doesn't really lead to much other than him winning the hardcore championship, and then heading off, eventually to WWF soon thereafter. But I don't know, it wasn't. I don't know, it wasn't like a big. I mean, really, WWF he doesn't head in there until 2001. But there's nothing really between here and the end of his run that gave him this big push out of it. It was like, okay, he beats Luger, he's getting some big wins, but they don't really follow up and do go all the way with this. So this is what I mean to say.
Well, that's a hard thing to do. Stop and start a guy and let it fade, especially where he got that big win over Lex. You know what I mean? It looks like he's in position to do something. So hopefully that, I don't know. It's easy to second guess, but Ming could have really drawn some money too.
I agree. So then Bret Hart is in the back with Mean Gene. He says, "May the best man win." Later on, so saying babyface versus babyface. Let's see who the best wrestler is, me or Benoit. Later on the night, Scott Hall, who's originally supposed to face Rick Steiner, obviously, like I mentioned, he's the TV champion and the U.S. champion. Nash is with him, and he says, let's bring somebody out. Who do you got? It actually ends up being Booker T. Scott Hall would end up beating Booker T to retain the U.S. and TV championship. Match goes about 6 minutes. Nothing bad, but just a solid match here as Hall ends up getting the victory. Do you like that though? A little bit of a surprise, and the surprise ends up losing, or do you think maybe Booker T, if you're the surprise, you could probably get a victory here?
Well, I do like the surprise, and usually a surprise should go over, but I don't like that they only this is to me, when you give me the times, this is like a TV show, not a pay per view.
Yeah, it's a little bit short. Some of the matches are a little short,
Little
and
5 minutes with Booker
yeah,
and Scott
and there's
Hall.
12 matches on a pay per view in total. That's a lot to me. I feel like you got to cut that down to 7 or 8.
To me, I'd rather watch 6 good matches. I'd rather have a good steak than 14 hamburgers.
Yep,
Yeah, you know, these guys are the top of the top. Booker T and Scott Hall, and then Luger and Ming. 5 minutes. You gave me a
yep,
lot of 5 minute matches. Five,
yeah,
6 matches.
yep.
You're not even breaking a sweat yet.
I agree. After the match, the Harris boys, Creative Control, again are out there to beat up Booker T. For what reason, I don't know. The lights go out, they come back on, and a big jacked black woman named Midnight beats up the Harris boys along with Booker T. So there's some sort of relationship they're teasing with Booker T and this woman, Midnight, who was pretty green, not that well trained. It seemed like she was going to be their version, perhaps, of China. Maybe that's what Russo was going for here because, she's big, she's jacked, she's in shape, she has that China look to her for sure. But they're obviously teasing some sort of relationship with Booker T and this woman Midnight who's debuting.
There's only one China. Anytime, what you just said, that's what everybody said when they saw her. Oh, they're trying to make somebody like China.
Yep.
Every time, and I'm not knocking the lady, she's probably a wonderful person. But every time she came on, it just reminded people we didn't have China.
Yep. So the next matchup, David Flair versus Kimberly Page. This match goes 5 minutes again, thank God, and it's a no contest. So basically, Russo said to Kimberly, "Oh, if you want to be, here, you got to wrestle." So David Flair actually has a match with her. Arn Anderson comes out to try to reason with him. DDP comes out. So really, I mean, just a total dud. I mean, nothing here, but it goes 5 minutes. I mean, this is pretty bad. They probably could have saved it for Nitro or whatever. I mean, this didn't need to be on the pay per view to me.
Kimberly did a great job with the Nitro Girls.
Yeah.
Why? why do that? Yeah, I know she's a beautiful lady, but didn't do anything for her. Didn't do anything for David. I don't think, did it?
No, nope.
And again, 5 minutes.
Yeah, all short matches. So then we have Goldberg versus Sid Vicious is up next. Remember the last time we talked about how Sid was bloody and a mess when Goldberg beat him in the middle of during this feud. So it's almost like they're trying to turn Sid into this big baby face, a la Austin when Brett beat him and he was bleeding and stuff. It seemed like that's what they were going for here. Goldberg ends up defeating Sid Vicious in an I Quit match via technical submission. Again, only 5 minutes and 30 seconds. Goldberg gets the win here. Sid never quit. He just passed out. So the ref calls for the bell as Goldberg had him in a Cobra clutch sort of maneuver. So again, Sid looks like the babyface who just won't quit, and Goldberg ends up getting the win. Crowd, by the way, wasn't that into
He is the babyface that won't quit, but he can get beat in 5 minutes.
it by Goldberg. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, to me, I don't know. Like, I don't know what they were going for there. I would almost reverse the roles because the crowd wasn't into it. I would like you would almost want Goldberg being like the guy that you rally behind. Just I don't know. It just seemed like out of place that they were kind of trying to put Sid into that spot.
Half a year before, people go to the building chanting Goldberg. Now they want to make him the guy he wrestled before, right? He wrestled Sid before when Sid was a big heel. You want to make the guy the babyface against probably at one time the biggest babyface the company had.
Right. Yep. And to me, like the match was going along good, just the finish sucked, and I don't know. I didn't care for it. I didn't get the direction kind of where they were trying to go for with Sid here. Like you trying to make Goldberg a heel and Sid the babyface. It just didn't sit right. It was weird.
And again, 5 minutes.
Yep. So then we have the main event of the evening: Bret Hart versus Chris Benoit. Bret Hart defeats Benoit via submission in the tournament final to win the vacant WCW World Heavyweight Championship. Match goes 18 minutes, and it's a pretty damn good match here. But the only thing I didn't like about the match, so Malenko comes down and tries to cheat. Like Goldberg gets involved, the Hall is involved. Like there's too much cheating involved for this title match. Even though it was good, and even though the end there's just basically Benoit going for the crossface, but Hart gets out of it and gets him in the sharpshooter, and Benoit taps and gets the win, leading to the end of the match. I feel like there was too much bullshit for a world title tournament final.
Those two guys didn't need anybody except themselves. To me, it takes away from them. Two of the best performers, and they are dear friends, so you know they're going to have the match of the year. Do you need to load that up like that? And I like the finish.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's a world title. Do you have to bastardize it? It's that bad?
And because it's in Toronto, I mean, it felt like you had the big fight feel the match of Benoit and Brett. You almost didn't need anything else, but I
They're
still
two
liked it.
baby
Still,
faces from Canada, right?
yeah.
Why would people come down?
I don't know. I think maybe not. Maybe I guess you could say overbooking a little bit, but I guess you're trying to interject something into the match that really doesn't need because you have a tournament final in Canada with two Canadians going for the world title. But to me, great match, kind of showing that Benoit's like, oh, he's almost there, pushes Brett to the limit and can't get there. But I feel like you don't need any of the interference stuff. You don't need any of that other stuff.
They're two baby faces too in Canada. Two
Hmm.
Canadian baby faces in
Yep.
Canada. Just ring the bell and let them perform their
Yep.
magic.
Only good thing is like when Goldberg and those guys kind of get away, then we get back to the match and then we get to the finish without having them at least involved in the finish of the match with these two great legendary workers.
I still don't like the guys coming down.
Yeah, me neither. So that's the end of the tournament, though. Brett wins the 32-man tournament, defeats Benoit. At least the match goes 18 minutes. At least it was a good match. After the match, the pyro goes off, and Brett is celebrating in the ring as the crowd cheers, and the show goes off the air. So the last moment we see is Brett kind of celebrating with the title and him finally becoming the WCW World Heavyweight Champion.
Good ending.
What do you think of the show just overall from what we were surmising here, like from what we were talking about overall the show?
To me, it's a TV show. 5-minute matches. Too much.
Do you think that obviously if you cut down the matches, you cut down the storyline, you cut down on Jarrett and creative control beating up everybody, probably would have been better, right?
There's no storyline. It's a constant beat up, and there's no payoff. Is there ever going to be a payoff?
Not really, no.
Well, one of them wins the world title, so I mean, I don't know. I have no idea.
So to me, I put it, I guess, in the middle, just because I like Benoit versus Jarrett, I like Brett versus Benoit, I like Brett versus Sting. So I mean, there's some of the matches there it's good. It's just that some of the storyline BS in between, not so good.
Well, because of what you just said, I'd have to go in the middle too. But I'd rather have seen Scott Hall and Booker have more time.
Yep.
Let and Ming have more time. You know, you didn't need that dog collar match because that's very hard to work.
Yep, and you didn't need David Flair versus Kimberly Page either.
No. And you didn't need Interjet, the 6-man tag.
Yep, definitely wasted some time with some of those matches, for sure.
Yeah.
So let's head towards the plugs. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. Check out the website, tmptempire.com. Go to Pro Wrestling Tees, ProWrestlingTees.com. Visit the Kevin Sullivan Store. You can follow Kevin on Instagram at Taskmaster Talks. Kevin, what else you got going on in this crazy world?
This Saturday, I'll be in Homestead, Florida for CCW. They got a great little thing going. And come and see me. Say hello.
All right, awesome stuff. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. See you right back here next time for a little Taskmaster Talks with Kevin Sullivan. We'll see you next week, folks.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Follow us on Twitter at the Hannibal TV for instant updates.